thank you, everyone. Dana Van Anderson here. It's great to have you here today. I'll be our moderator. I just wanted to say that when we come up with these themes, we were just talking about this earlier, you know, you come up with them in advance, and then you come to the conference, and everybody's talking about it. So it feels like this is kind of the theme of this. Everybody's aligned. There's this convergence around, hey, how do we create more business value with sustainability? We just heard from Caterpillar, really super interesting discussion, and this will be a similar discussion. We'll go down a few very specific areas, but it's just really an interesting convergence, if you will. So our guests have been introduced. I think, Tim, we were supposed to, you wanted me to let everyone know that you got a master's in environmental science and zoology from Miami University, Redhawks, 29-0. I don't know, something I'm supposed to say.
Only unbeaten team in the country.
Yes,
Yep.
So for you sports fans, so thank you very much for that. So we just wanted to jump in here, and I thought before we did a deep dive into our topic today, Tim, I wanted to invite you to share a little bit about Toyota
Sure.
and their sustainability journey.
Sure,
Tim?
sure. I think we have a slide or two, but yeah, I just wanted to provide a little background, maybe just set the stage on how Toyota approaches environmental sustainability. You know, even though I represent and I lead our North America activities for sustainability, we are really aligned across the globe for Toyota, and one way we do that is through the 2050 challenge. So what we're showing up here is, this is our 2050 challenge. This is our long-term goal. These are long-term visions for environmental sustainability. So it consists of 6 targets. On the left, you have our carbon neutrality targets. So those involve our life cycle emissions, our product side, and our operations. And on the right side are 3 other topics. We call it's net positive impact, but those involve our circularity targets, our water target, and our biodiversity targets. So these were established, again, across the globe for each region for Toyota to align to. And on our next slide, I can kind of talk about how we then approach that. So even though this 2050 challenge was developed just 11 years ago, we've actually been doing activities towards these goals for almost 30 years. So the way we do it is we establish 5-year action plans. We're currently in our 7th 5-year action plan. It ends this month. And then in April, we'll release our 8th environmental action plan. It'll be our 8th 5-year plan. And so again, we've been doing it for a long time, but when the 2050 challenge was established, it helped us, again, all align towards that one goal. In 2020, we established our supply chain program, knowing that we can't achieve several of these targets without our supply chain. So that started in 2020. In 2035, we do have a target, a midterm target, to be carbon neutral across all of our operations. And of course, in 2050 is when we plan to achieve all of our targets, all 6 targets by 2050.
That's great.
Yeah, that's really,
Yep.
We've had a lot of interesting conversations offline about how to operationalize a journey, and I think the 5-year planning cycle is really a good plan. So I wanted to just talk a little bit about Cognizant. So I would like to know how many of you have ever heard of Cognizant? Okay.
Well, that's great.
All right, we're up to, it's more than I thought, actually. So I always like to say Cognizant is kind of the biggest company you've never heard of. You know, we have over 360,000 employees worldwide in 270 countries with revenues of over $20 billion. So why haven't you heard of us? We're in every Fortune 100, Fortune 500 company everywhere. It's because as a technology service provider, our goal is to our brand is all about making you better, augmenting what your strategy is, and our job is not to be cognizant. Our job is to make you successful. So there's some feeds and speeds here on this side, and there's a little video I can play that kind of talks about how we think about how we provide value as a technology provider in the current world that includes AI.
In
Intelligence is the foundation of any good business. But if every good business has it, how do you stand out? Luckily, there's a tool to heighten your intelligence, build on it, elevate it. It's called intuition. Born from human instinct, some might see it as uncertain or anti-data. But in fact, it's the ultimate demonstration of data-driven decision-making. When it's enabled by technology, intuition stops feeling like a hunch and starts looking like confidence. The kind of confidence you get when you work with Cognizant. The business engineers who help you anticipate expectations and act instantly, as if on intuition. The ones that help you employ IoT so you can sense changes in your customers and company. Who crunch data using AI so you learn about trends before they're trendy. Who create software to help you act on your intuition and deploy it in the cloud so you can convert it into products that produce results better and faster than your competition. It's how Cognizant enriches what you know with the know-how to get to the future first. This is intuition, and we can engineer it. Cognizant. Intuition engineered.
Thank you. So that's just a little bit about our company and just a little bit about, I got to go back here. We're missing let's see here. So in terms of our environmental commitments and progress, as a technology service provider, we have a different profile. We're largely, on-site with customers. So we're really looking at our own emissions, but we've really made a lot of progress in terms of reducing absolute emissions. And as you can see, 100% renewable energy by 2026. We're on track for that. Currently, we're at 46% of renewable sources, so we're making a lot of plans on that. We have a very extensive land zero waste program in terms of diversion of technology. We made great progress on that. And then reduction of absolute emissions by 90% by 2030. So a lot of similar goals to many other organizations. Obviously, we as a provider to our customers will provide that information, but we're on the same journey with the rest. So, and just a little bit about Cognizant's sustainability services organization. It's over 4,000 strong with 75 core sustainability SMEs and 150 data science folks. So I think you're hearing a lot about how to get the power of the data. Well, you can't get the power of the data unless you figure out how to get it in a place where you can leverage things like AI. So we actually work at all levels of organizations, from establishing strategy, but then we move through the value chain in terms of not only reporting, but also transitioning into sustainable supply chain, helping with sustainable manufacturing and sustainable products, and also with sustainable IT. And as a global integrator, we work with many of you, I'm sure you're out here, our comrades and partners, to actually really work to bring the best solution to your organization, because not every tool fits every job. So we actually sort of help curate, we're sort of maybe the Zagat's of sustainability tools and data tools to help you configure what you have, or if something you have isn't working as well as it should because it maybe doesn't have the data, we can help you with that as well. So there's a lot of ways that we work with organizations, both strategically but also from a delivery perspective. So this is, again, we talked about the sustainability, but beyond reporting. How many have seen conversations about this at this conference already? You're all going to raise your hands, I think. I mean, it's a big topic, and I think, as we all know, what's changing is, the traditional landscape of sustainability is shifting. Sustainability as a aspiration or an afterthought. We've kind of weeded out. If anybody's familiar with the Gartner hype cycle, there was a lot of hype, a lot of people making net zero claims with no ability to really execute on that. And now we're kind of in the trough of disillusionment as we look at an environment where we see a ton of change. In some places, it's not very sustainability friendly. Other places, we see shifting requirements, delays, and fragmentation. So we're seeing a big shift there, but simultaneously, what we're seeing, and for those of you who were at Climate Week, one of the things that really impressed me is that they said, in a way, what's been happening is difficult, but in another way, it sort of weeds out the riffraff, which is good. So it really takes the people who maybe were the Me Too's or just want to talk about it, and we're really getting down to people who really see sustainability as a strategic capability and a differentiator. So when we engage with a lot of organizations now, they either see it as something that's existential to their business, either the supply chain or other aspects of how they're consuming energy, or they're dealing with a precious commodity. And they're really looking at it as something they're looking differently at. So they're really shifting from reporting and compliance to focusing on embedding sustainability, resilience, and efficiency as a strategic capability and differentiator. And that's done because it's directly tied to margin protection, operational resilience, and customer value. So in that shift, we're seeing a different conversation. Now, some folks, like Toyota, kind of got that memo a while ago, so they kind of had a head start. I've seen other organizations that started early, that really saw this strategic capability. So today is really going to be about in what ways are we seeing that at a practical level. So Tim, I'd like to kind of start with you in terms of why is beyond compliance important to Toyota?
So beyond compliance, compliance is now, it's just the minimum expectation of what we're doing. It's what we do every day. We don't set targets for compliance. It's something we must do. And so now when we're talking about sustainability, of course, now we're looking more at the long term. It's about setting ourselves up with targets and goals that will make sure that we're a successful company in the future. So what we're doing now is helping to build that story with our executives, with our leadership team and our team members. It's too easy sometimes to be looked at as a cost center for the company, when in reality, we're actually adding more value to the company. We're reducing risk to the company. And so we're working to better tell those stories. Of course, there are going to be projects or initiatives that, of course, are going to cost money. But we also have some wins. We have some true projects and initiatives that have a true ROI, true cost savings. And so, we're moving beyond compliance to start working towards that kind of messaging to get better support for what we're doing. Because again, it's truly adding value to the company.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I think for a lot of organizations, getting the early wins and then being able to leverage that gets people kind of on the bandwagon. It's getting that started, but the people who are seeing that business value early, it's easier to then kind of step and repeat that. So Rajiv is, he actually is our global leader of our sustainability services, and has been the person to incubate the service line. And so he sees a lot of different companies. He works, and Rajiv, you work with many large multinational companies. Is what Tim is saying consistent with what you're seeing, and is there anything else you'd like to add?
No, absolutely, Dan. I think one of the things that I would like to state that when we started a journey like 5 years back, right, as a practice, and where the industry is today, I would say that compliance is pretty much it represents the minimum credentials required, right? It basically tells a company where you are at any point in time, but it not necessarily goes into develop a product or a service which is sustainable, has long-term resilience, right? And that's where in the last year or so, I would say the companies have started to move, that many companies have already set the benchmark, they have the initial goals, they are doing the minimum compliance required. Now how do you use the data to make a better product, a resilient product, and do long-term good, not only for your own company, for the consumers, and in general. Yeah. So that shift has started, as Tim mentioned, right? Companies like Toyota are using the data to make a better product, to make a better supply chain, better procurement, and that's
yeah. Thank you. And we're saying the same thing. I work for Rajiv, so I can ask him these questions. I should ask him something embarrassing just because we're all here, but I won't do that to him. Before we sort of move beyond the regulatory environment and kind of classical sustainability, because we know that although some of the climate disclosures and some of the regulatory stuff has been relaxed or delayed, when you do need to report, you need to do that with a greater level of transparency, and that creates a real data challenge, especially with the supply chain and doing due diligence. And we're also seeing that customers want it. You all know that. So it's not going to go away. So the opportunity is really to turn compliance-driven data collection into operational intelligence. So, and Tim, starting again with you, what are you seeing in terms of the shifting regulatory landscape and customer expectations?
Well, as you mentioned, it's definitely shifting. As you all know, definitely shifting, at least in the U.S. A lot of regulatory changes, policy changes, standards, protocols, continues to change. But like many of us here, we're a global company, and so we have global customers. We have expectations beyond what's happening maybe regionally. And so, we mentioned that Toyota's been doing this for 30 plus years, and we have our 2050 challenge out there. And so we're not stopping, right? We have to continue regardless of all the stuff that's happening maybe regionally. We have to continue with these programs and these initiatives to set us up for that future success. So again, despite what's happening maybe locally, we're working on being ready for some of those global requirements that we see, and then they're state by state. So I think the message is we're not stopping. We have to be ready for when those changes come to the U.S.
Yeah, if you're a multinational corporation, you kind of have to play through in spite of the sad part, obviously, is that then Australia will come up with their requirement, and then California will come up with theirs, but then they want you to report the gas emissions in a different way. So it's really kind of unfortunate that somebody came along and knocked down our little sand hill, or our little ant hill. But I have faith that over time it'll reconstitute and we'll get more to standardized. So Rajiv, is this consistent with what you're seeing? And is there any sort of regional or vertical market differences you're seeing in terms of this focus?
Yeah, so I think the conversations have definitely pivoted from broad voluntary goals to a very focused set of initiatives that companies are now taking up. And some of the key things, I would say, three key things that most of the companies are pivoting. One is, of course, doing the DMA. So each company should know what are their goals from a sustainability perspective. So, as many companies that have already done it, they're doing the assessment. The key to that is data assurance, right? The data which is being collected across the supply chain, assurances on top of that, validation. And finally, the entire transparency in the supply chain, procurement, goods cost. So those are the three key metrics I would say that companies are moving on. And then, of course, there are some sectoral, I would say, needs or priorities that companies are looking for. If you look at a fintech or financial services company, they're using the data more from a point of view of risk and assessment of mortgages and loans, so that they want to know what's the risk of the properties that they're insuring. If you go to energy companies, which are at the forefront of this revolution, because they are upgrading their grids, modernizing it from an energy system perspective, and especially with the data centers and the EVs evolution. You look at the communications and technology companies, right? I mean, they are, again, the entire data center boom is happening, so they're looking at, I would say, optimizing the energy spend, their technology infrastructure, which comes with it. If you're looking at consumer good companies, agri-tech companies, the focus has shifted to now plastic waste, PPWR, EPR kind of regulations, which beyond just, I would say, sustainability. And if you look at the heavy manufacturing, which probably are the biggest emitters, right? So they are looking at starting with the low-hanging fruit of energy optimization, asset management, using IoT technologies to rewire, reconnect everything to So I would say those are some of the differences.
Yeah, well, it's a lot. So and there's a lot to discuss. And again, we're connecting to some giant topics here, which we're happy to talk afterwards or do a future follow-on for each of these topics. And the next really enormous topic is really, we really look at the lens of where we're headed, and there's operational excellence, there's, security and resilience of the supply chain, and then we have this other little thing called AI that overlays that. So those are really the themes that we're really looking at. And when you think about operational excellence, you're really talking about operational efficiency as a core. It's things like energy management, it's factory automation, it's sustainable distribution management, it's fleet electrification or hydrogen fleets in terms of changing to a clean energy source with the goal towards lowering operating costs, reducing emissions, higher productivity. So Rajiv, I'll start with you with this question. Where have you seen the biggest areas across the industry where you're seeing the biggest shift towards using sustainability to drive operational excellence, and where do you see the highest value?
Yeah, so I think the highest value, again, it has been happening for many years now, but the focus has intensified, and there's a lot of work still needs to be done. I would say the biggest target is decarbonization of the entire value chain. The energy savings are absolutely the most important things that companies can achieve. Technologies are there, so that is the biggest value. Followed by, I would say, predictive maintenance. Again, not looking predictive maintenance only from a point of view of machine failures, but also across wastages, plant shutdowns, the entire value chain, right? So there's a lot of, I would say, savings to be had there. And then finally, I would say the entire supply chain traceability, and with this whole, the global economy getting disturbed and by so many political situations, it's ever more important that how the supply chain flows, right? So those are, I would say, topics where a lot of savings can happen, and the technology which is also overlaying the entire digitization and the digital twin coming on top. So how you look at the data, how you do the analysis, so that is very critical. Now technologies have come in, we can look at the data from different perspectives, but these three, I would say, are the key value creators, not only from an operations standpoint, but also will eventually lead to reduction of emissions.
Yeah, and I think we're at the beginning of the journey. So Tim, over to you. In terms of, there's some kind of more specific example where you're taking the sustainability metrics that you have and kind of shifting those left or, sustainably first to use to drive business decisions, and how are you achieving that?
So one of the struggles, well, first of all, we have a lot of metrics, like I'm sure everybody else does. We have a lot of KPIs, a lot of data. And one of the things, we're doing a lot of improvement on this, but one of the things we're focusing on is the timeliness of the data. Sometimes some of our metrics, we won't receive the data on how we're performing for maybe a month or 3 months after the fact. And that just doesn't work well for trying to achieve some operational efficiencies. So we're working to try to get that data more timely so that we can visualize it. So that's the second part, is we're trying to visualize the data so that those that are making decisions, those that can identify the differences, can see it almost real time, so that we can quickly recover, identify the issues, and make changes. And then the other thing is we're trying to automate as much as we can.
That's key.
Get away from, like we heard earlier, the Excel spreadsheets. We still have a ton of Excel spreadsheets. The more we can automate that to get it automatically uploaded into our systems, it's only going to improve the accuracy and the efficiency of the data.
Well, your quote, as when we talked earlier, was good decisions need good data.
Yep.
And it's spot on, I think. It's not very glamorous to talk about data all the time, but it does make a difference. So another huge difference is supply chains. And I was talking to somebody about supply chain risk, and if 3 years ago you talked about risk and resilience, what did you hear? You heard, what are you talking about? We don't care about that. And now all of a sudden everyone is like talking about it. So, sometimes ideas take a little while to seed in terms of why the supply chain matters, but we're seeing that shift. So, Tim, how is Toyota working with their supply chain? Your supply chain?
Yeah. So, we're fortunate to be involved in. One of the ways we're doing it is there's an industry work group. It's called Supplier Partnership for the Environment, and it basically is all the OEMs along with our supply chain. And this work group, one of the things we're all working on together is to develop consistent standards, metrics, and the tools that our competitors and our supply chain can then all work on together, right? We see the list of requests that our supply chain gets, and we understand how difficult it is for those suppliers to deal with that. So we're trying to make it more consistent and give them the tools so that we can all receive the data and it can be consistent.
And Tim, I believe you said you're part of some supplier standardization forums to try to, for the exchange of information? I think you mentioned that.
Yeah, yep. So again, with supplier partnership, we're actually developing some standards that then can be distributed out to our supply chain. So again, that hopefully, they're collecting the data one time the same way and presenting it to their customers the same way each time. That's one of the goals of it.
Yeah, it's kind of, I mean, you've got a lot of, open data platform initiatives and open reporting, but this kind of reminds me of the EDA, life before a SKU and how you share product specs. But now all that's basically standardized, and I think over time that'll happen. But I think it will take companies like Toyota and other large organizations forming a consortia to sort of push the supply chain to the right, because you got the muscle. You got the muscle to do that. So, and I think that's really the key. So last but not least, and we want to leave a couple minutes for questions if we can fit them in here. Everyone's favorite topic. Who here has been to a talk that's talked about AI? Anybody here? Here we got everybody. I don't think anybody could. I should say who isn't, please stand up, and there'd be like one person in the back that was like taking a nap or something. I don't know. And obviously the jury is still out. I mean, I think we're all in this world of AI for good or evil. What is the net balance? So everybody sort of making these arguments about, even though AI, has a relatively has an environmental impact, the potential for using AI to come up with new compounds and change operations should net out. There's a bunch of other social implications and things about that, but we won't cover that today in terms of the impact and benefit. But so Rajiv, I know that this is for you. Since Cognizant has leaned in, they've spent, I think we invested over $1 billion in AI. Our CEO is very bullish on helping companies drive their digital transformation using AI across industries, and it is having an impact. And I'm just wondering where you are seeing the greatest interest and initial success. I know it's early days, but is there, in terms of the topics of operational excellence or supply chain?
Yeah, so I would say so many of the, absolutely these are early days of AI adoption. Technologies are coming in. The key to that is to develop I would say the playbooks, right? In each of the areas, what are the use cases which will benefit the most? So use cases where most of the validation work, assurance work, which is very critical, right, especially from an ESG standpoint. So we are, developed AI models which are, looking on the data, doing assurances, and validations, more like the OCR kind of work. So that's one area. If you look at only the governance side of it. Now, if you look at the social side of it, we're using AI like on language processing models to look at the supplier communication, supplier commitments to call out the areas where human rights violations are happening. The data is not coming right from your suppliers. So that's one of the areas that you can automate, and there's a lot of value because you're not sitting there and browsing through messages or documentation. And then you finally, if you're coming at environment, then as you're deploying or writing agents to look at the energy data, the spend data, and then trying to find out blips, white spaces, where there are opportunities, which can be optimized across the value chain. So, we're still doing at pilot level. Yeah. Many of the companies have adopted to say, in a few of their plants, and once it's successful, they will scale out across the enterprise. But they will drive immense value in some of these tasks, and the effort then can be spent in actually going and developing a better product. Yeah,
and I think people are dipping their toe in. We do customer roundtables where we look at sustainability through 3 lenses, through sustainable AI, through the use of sustainability to drive sustainability outcomes, and then use of sustainability to help with sustainability insights. It's been fascinating. Love to talk with folks who might be interested in that. So we just have a couple minutes for questions. Is there anybody who has any questions or generally wants to give us a hard time here? So we've got somebody here up front here. No, we'll get the microphone for you. Hang on.
Thank you. Thank you so much for such a lovely panel. I'm curious to get your perspective, so especially in the recent wake of the rescinding of EPA's greenhouse gas endangerment finding, do you find that there is waning top-down interest in decarbonization measures, or are you more or less operating on the premise that this is a short-term blip, but in the long term, the investment is worthwhile, and in the long term, the investment is interested, or folks are interested
You're
in
at the
it.
front lines too, so.
I feel like, yeah, especially for
Well, I can
vehicle
say,
emissions.
I can say,
Thanks.
again, we have our 2050 challenge. We have not changed one of those targets since it was developed, and we're not planning to change any of our targets. And so, again, we're a global company, and so we need to respond to those regional differences, but we are not changing our path.
Yeah, and that's pretty consistent with almost all of our clients. They're playing through, and it's driven by a lot of things. But other questions?